Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. That's 9 programs, 9 different opportunities for you to hear 9 different conversations with 9 different guests. And we hope that you will tap into each one of those that are also streamed live at richarddugan.com. Then we have the podcasts of all 9 programs. They're on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations, and I hope you will. And let's see. Oh, we also we could use your help. Yes, we can. We could really use your help financially. We do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And if you feel led, called, your intuition says, "Hey, let's help this guy out with whatever we can." We'll take energetic support as well. With that PayPal account, when they ask you to whom are you sending, Richard at richarddugan.com is the email you want to put in. That's Richard at richarddugan.com. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help down the road. We also ask that you take some time during the decade of perfect vision, to go within and listen to that still small voice. Now, when I say perfect vision, what I'm referring to, of course, is the 2020s. It's real important that we do that. It's taken me years to not so much develop, but to trust. That's probably the biggest thing each of us has to deal with when it comes to listening to our intuition, or as I like to refer to it, listening to the still small voice and following the promptings. I used to say somewhat seriously, if you're not going to follow the promptings, why are you listening? So I don't say that anymore. I just recommend that you do it. It will, I guarantee you, in my life experience, it saved me a lot of grief along the way. We have a program today that I think is going to just be absolutely extraordinary. And how interesting that is, because our very special guest, Pattie-Dale Tye, is our guest, who is the author of, folks, hang on to your hats here. I don't have mine on right now. Ordinary to Extraordinary, Achieving Remarkable Career Success Through Passion, Purpose, and Preparation, the 3 Ps. Pattie-Dale, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard. And I love that. I love the still, quiet voice. I try to keep it at least active most of the time. It's a tough thing to do in the world we live in, though, isn't it?
I was going to say, especially in the business world, it's like, no. I've got my consultants. I've got the various department heads, and I don't need to do that. That's a waste of time. Meditation for some also. And personally, as far as we'll call it conventional meditation, I don't sit, with the like this and the lotus position and all of that. I will meditate while I am cutting up wood for firewood for the winter, or cutting the weeds. That's my meditation, because I'm out in nature. I'm out amongst the flora and the fauna, if you will. I absolutely love working outside. I just wish that during the summertime here in Santa Barbara, and we've had some mild summers in the past. This year, not so much. The record for July, apparently, California has had the hottest July on record.
Wow.
And we won't even go into that subject, okay? Suffice it to say, ladies and gentlemen, let's just clean up our home. Can we do that, please? Pick up a little here, do a little dusting, clean up our home. That's all we really need to do, in my opinion. But we're going to talk today about going from ordinary to extraordinary, both in the workplace. But I know that when we talk about this kind of subject with many of our other guests, many of the steps or what have you, rules, they apply to everyday life as well as the work or business life, right?
Absolutely. I have a notion in the book called a twofer. And sometimes it's a threefer, and that is everything needs to ladder up. Everything needs to attach to something else. So what I do in the workplace, I need to be able to bring in some of home with that, and vice versa. There are disciplines, there are attitudes, there is meditation. And while I'm like you, I'm not going to be able to put my arm on in the. I will tell you, Richard, that it is the truth. If we don't step away from the computer, and I read the other day a stat that every 20 minutes, step away for at least 20 seconds. If we don't do that, we're going to physically be hunched over. Our eyes are going to strain and hurt and not be there for all the beauty in the world to see. And, athletes don't do that. We've just finished 2 or 3 glorious weeks of watching those extraordinary Olympic athletes, and they do not put their foot to the pedal for 12 hours a day like a corporate executive or a leader or a manager. They give themselves breaks, intentional breaks. Their coaches know to ask them to do that. We must do that. In the workplace, it can be stepping away and going to say hello to somebody. It can be taking a minute, and as you said, looking out in nature, looking out your window, walking outside, feeling the sun, but you've got to step away and get your game back in an energized place.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. I myself, when here at the physical station, where I will run certain programs or sometimes just insert commercials into a network feed, there is a space. Let's say it's a 2-hour program, and they take their last break of the first hour at like quarter of. Their next break won't be until quarter past the next hour, and everything between that in that half hour is all automated. It happens automatically. I walk out that door and I go out to the street. Now, I don't want to say unfortunately, I happen to work in town. Although I've got it down now to where I can be home 2 days out of the week. So I get to work from home, and I'm in the middle of nature, as I was mentioning earlier. And I text with the gentleman who is feeding us the audio, and I say, "Hey, I'm taking my break now. I'm going to go out and walk around a little bit." And he says, "Lucky you," in the text, because apparently he hasn't figured it out yet. And I'm trying to encourage him. When you have got a couple of minutes, just go outside and breathe some air outside the building. It doesn't take much. So I couldn't agree with you more in that regard. I also try to get over to the beach as often as I can. You're absolutely right. We need to step away. Now, there is one element that I noticed, and this is just a sidebar thing on our phones. And I even have this feature on my laptop. Specifically at night, or even in a dark room, it may be middle of the day, but the room you're in, I have no windows in the room I'm in right now, right? There's a feature on your phone, and there's a feature on laptops. I maybe on PCs as well, and Apple, where it puts a brown filter over the screen, because something about the blue light,
yes,
our screens interferes with, and maybe you know about this and you can expound on this, but it interferes with our brain function, or especially at night, our ability to sleep.
Exactly. People are buying the blue blocker glasses. They are doing things to block out their screens. And Richard, sleep has popped to the top as being one of the most important missed opportunities for health out there. And lack of sleep doesn't discriminate, right? I can be an 80-year-old and I don't get enough sleep. I can be a 17-year-old and I don't get enough sleep. And it is proven that if I don't get uninterrupted sleep, a period of time for REM, a period of time for deep, I'm not going to be all that I can be the next day. And you know what? It takes a lot of energy to be all that you can be. And one of the subtitles of my book is preparation. And you have to prepare, in my opinion, every day for the next day if you want to optimize life and optimize living. And for me, if you want to have an extraordinary career. And so you got to get the fundamentals right. And for me, one of those fundamentals is sleep. The other is exercise. The other is mental peace. And that is the stepping away. For me, Richard, like you, that is going outside. I love to see nature, but I love to feel the sun. And it is also medically proven that it changes your brain when you outside, especially a walk in the woods. So all of those baseline pieces go into preparation, in my opinion, along with being ready to jump on whatever comes your way the next day.
Well, it is, there's no question that it's an important factor that we need to consider in our lives. Because if we don't start taking time for self, it's one of those things too, and I find this interesting. Maybe we could talk a little bit about this. And I realize that, and let's bring it into the business world too, because this also applies to family and so forth and community. Yes, you were hired to do a particular task. You were hired to be in a group of people who are carrying out a broader perspective task, if you will. Maybe I'm over here. I'm making the rotors for the car that's being built in the assembly plant, but I'm part of a team that's building a car. But at the same time, even in those situations, is it? And I think your first example there is appropriate. We do have to look out for number one, because if we don't take care of number one, how are we going to participate in a community event like building a car if we're not feeling well? And that's one of the reasons why I often say that, we need to shut the place down for 2 weeks when the flu rolls around, so that everybody can get through it, get out of it, get done, so that our productivity of the plant doesn't suffer. If that's what's important to you, the productivity, then why wouldn't we do that? Because if you've got sick people, then what's the quality of their work?
Absolutely. I agree. And I thought you were going to another place, Richard, and that is sort of speed of the captain, speed of the crew. And that I write in my book about another place to go for mental health and healing. And that, in my opinion, is generosity. And generosity is what I think of as a superpower in the workforce and in the workplace, because so many of us go in, sit down, grind out our part of the work, and then go home. If you will take time to look to your left and your right, and that might be on your screen because maybe you're a virtual employee, team member, but look to your right, and how are their days going? And what are you able to do to lift their burden and to give a little bit of your time to them, even if it's just for a caring moment of conversation? If it's their moment to be able to step away and talk about what they did last night that was so much fun with their kids or their dogs, etc. Generosity in the workplace gives you great depth, and it energizes me. And it's not just to the team members that you work with, but to your leader. Leaders are having a tough time these days. Tough environment that half their team won't come into the office. The other half that's there isn't so sure they really want to be there, or they might. It seems there's a lot on social media about discontent. Whether that is true or not, it is the voice that people are giving it. And so leaders are not having an easy time. So be the generous person to your leader. How is what are they working on? What are they tasked with? What can you do for them before the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of their quarter? You'll be amazed at how that makes you feel. You'll be amazed at how it can propel your career.
We are having, I think, a rather interesting conversation here with our very special guest who has written a very interesting book, especially, and I tap in, of course, to a lot of different things. The title in this case is Ordinary to Extraordinary. She talks about the three Ps, achieving remarkable career success through passion, purpose, and preparation. I want to talk a little bit more about those things as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is as always a pleasure to have different guests on the program to talk about these things that can really make a difference. I don't know about you, but first of all, I have a real hard time with the uh, aspect of considering that the economy is the most important element in our society and civilization. And I respond to that by saying, no, it's not. Because if you have companies that are producing products or services that are injuring or killing their consumer, and I will use the cigarette manufacturers as an example, then how is it that the economy is the most important thing if you're killing the consumer, the person who's buying your product? That doesn't make any sense. Uh,
Right.
so, but I mean, that's just me. I never put any of this stuff on anybody. It is what it is. But at the same time, I find it perplexing. Let me put it that way. Perplexing that people would just continue to make those kinds of statements when in fact it's the community. If we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't take care of one another, who cares what the economy is?
Mm.
And there's a paradox I find really interesting. And I know these statistics are going to come out. For the summer, people go on vacation, right?
Yes.
And then they travel all over the place and they spend all kinds of money. And then they complain about the economy. And I sit there going, what? What are you talking about? You just spent 1,000, 2,000. I have no idea how much. I grew up in a family of 8, and we traveled to San Diego, went to SeaWorld and stayed for a week on at an apartment that was right there on the beach. Oh, it was
Nice.
great. Went to Disneyland a couple of times. Traveled all over Arizona several times. I know for a family of 8, it wasn't cheap, but they did it anyway. And I don't recall my parents ever complaining about the economy because they
Yes.
just did what they were going to do. So
Well,
talk to
You know,
us a little bit about our mental focus when it comes to becoming extraordinary.
well, I want to unpack a few of the things that you said because you just packed a punch, Richard. So
Sorry about that.
no, I love it. So the first is when you talked about the economy and you used a cigarette company, and I will contrast that with so many of us have the life luxury of working for a company whose mission we deeply believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something I encourage folks to look for. And especially these days when life is coming at us so fast and so loudly and so opinionated,
Mm-hmm.
it is important that at the end of a workday, when you are going home or into your living room from your bedroom office, that you can say, I made a difference in this company today that makes a difference in lives in
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z. And that could be, I took great honor and pride in working for a health insurance company whose mission was to make sure that people lived long into their old age. There are so many mission-driven companies. And I do think these days, those are the ones that are having the most success in recruiting. in this Generation X environment. So that was one I wanted to unpack. And then the second is when we talk about money. Money is, I learned in the health insurance business that people are more emotionally attached to money than their health, right? And let's go back to cigarettes, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
15% of the population still smokes, by the way. And
what was it? I'm sorry. What was the percentage again?
18,
Holy
Richard.
mackerel.
And the last I saw, I don't even know, are cigarettes $10 a pack now? It's ridiculous. But they are more, people tend to be more emotionally attached to money than their health. And they will not spend money on things that would make them healthy necessarily. Mm-hmm. They will go for a less expensive alternative that is probably not healthy in so many circumstances. There is a big emotional attachment to money. And I encourage folks to really think about why they work. And I will say to them, you cannot say money. Why do you work? Because you're going to be working in career for 2,000 hours a year for 30 or 40 years. And I'm just going to add this, Richard, if you're lucky, because you clearly love your work. I love my work. I want to be working in total for 30, 40, 50 years. But I know that if I only use that one entity to measure how happy I am at work, which is how big is my paycheck, I'm not going to be very happy. So I encourage people to go intentionally into all the dimensions of why they work. And that's when you begin to be moving from ordinary to extraordinary, because you're finding your passion and your purpose, and you're in a mission-driven company.
Well, a couple of things that I've come across in the 45 years that I have been in this business. I've been working longer. I started working probably even earlier than 12 when I started mowing lawns in the neighborhood. But then I was a paper boy throughout my entire high school 4 years. But in the 45 years I've been in this industry, a couple of things. One of the things that my late father, said to me, he says, Richard, eat, drink, and be merry in moderation, because nobody gets out of this world alive. The second thing he said to me was, find something that you love doing, because you're going to be doing it for a long time. But then he added, don't get stuck like me. Well, my father didn't get stuck. When the printing company that moved to Utah, and he did not want to move the family to Utah, he went back to school, junior college, and got his computer programming degree and went on from there. And that was one of the aspects of our relationship as well, because in the mid-90s, I started building them. I went from, there's a red button on this keyboard somewhere, and then if I hit it and I don't find it, I'll blow the computer up. I went from that to, okay, so I plugged the sound card in here and the video card in here, and okay, now I need to set up the BIOS and blah, 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 blah. One of the other things that I learned on the job was you work with what you have until you get what you want.
I love that.
Another phrase, I may have to put this down in my book. Another phrase that I also learned was, in addition to working with what you have until you get what you want, is that my boss at the Christian radio station I was at for 15 years lived by the law of diminishing returns. I couldn't do that. Case in point, client came in, bought some time, came in with a box of 5-inch reels, said, hey, could we put these all together so that I've got shows ahead and everything? So I transferred the reels to cassette, and so forth. And I had those all done for him and everything. It was part of my job. I didn't get paid extra. And after, I think, 5 weeks, he canceled the program. And I'm sure my boss must have thought, oh my gosh, what a waste. We shouldn't have done that because. And I'm sitting here thinking, that wasn't a waste. First of all, I got some great experience that I'm able to use here at the station I'm working at, right? But this guy walks away from our radio station with a great taste in his mouth because we served him. And my present boss here in Santa Barbara that I've worked with for 18 years, you know what his mantra is?
What's that?
We're here to serve, period. So there is no, we can't do that. There is either yes or let me look into that. Let me see what we can do.
I love that because it just gives energy to the whole space when you don't say, no, we can't. No, we need to find another way. Let's find a way together. That's energizing versus no, and it shuts it down and people walk away so disappointed.
You know, you said something else about paychecks. I started that station. I started working there at the minimum wage of $3.65 an hour. Now that's going back to 1980. When I left the radio station in 95, I was making a whopping $7.35 an hour. Just about double.
Yes.
Just about double after 15 years. Well, I could have grumbled all the way through, even uttering some of the phraseology that some of my coworkers, some of whom I hired along the way, would say, you don't pay me enough to do that, i.e., I need you to clean the bathroom. You don't pay me enough to clean the bathroom. You don't pay me enough to sweep or vacuum the floor. You don't pay me enough to whatever it is. I could have taken that tack. But I was fortunate enough to be given a time slot to where I was doing interviews just like these in the evening, where I would actually record them during the day. And I began to realize that, all right, so I'm only making $3.65, $5.65, $6, $7, whatever it was. But when it comes to this extra thing that I've been given to fill some of the airtime until it's sold, was, okay, first of all, I get the airtime that I don't have to pay for. Second of all, I get to get the experience of doing these interviews and making the contacts and getting the materials, whether it was a CD or a book or whatever other materials came along. The conversation, and I honed those skills and those abilities and so forth. And I'm sitting here thinking, do you have any idea how much it would cost me to be able to do that if I had to pay for that?
Right.
And I'm getting paid for that. And that's why I say for that station in particular, it was the greatest education I was ever paid for, because I also learned about comparative religions, sociology, psychology, political science, and the list goes on, that I now carry to this day. I want to talk about this, and we've touched upon it a lot already. Passion. Following your passions can lead you to greater satisfaction and success. Oh, there was one other. I never hold on to or get territorial. I want someone, if someone came in right now and said, hey, I want to learn what you're doing, I would teach them everything I know. And then say, would you like a job? If we've got the money, if we can hire you, I'd love to hire you, because then it allows me to hand over the reins to someone else so I can go off and do other things. What do you think about this concept of territorialism, especially within the workplace?
So much of your wisdom that you've just imparted has to do with reframing the role you occupy. You are saying, Richard, this is what I get to do, not what I have to do. And if you passionately believe that, work turns into something entirely different, and it is a beautiful thing. And I just, one last thing on that, but I will tell you, I'm passionate about health. I always have been. As a friend of mine said, our mother was always sprinkling something on our cereal. I mean, wheat germ, vitamins, you name it.
Your mom too, huh? Wow.
Yeah, I've grown up with a passion for health. And so I find that everything that I have worked in and around occupied some health space until I'm now a chief operating officer for a law firm. And there's not a lot of outright health that we certainly serve healthcare companies and insurance companies, et cetera. But what that allowed me to do, Richard, which was exactly what you were speaking to, was to reframe my world. And oh, by the way, I now know so much about how a service firm works, the hierarchy or lack thereof in a service firm, because it's a member-owned firm. I know so much about the law, about the judicial system, and that is amazing. And I got paid to do all that learning. I get paid to do all that learning. So I love what you said, and it's so true. If we just flip the script, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I'm laughing because because of what the words you just used. Steve Martin came out with an album back in the 70s, which I still have, where he's doing this little song, da 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 da, and some people are in the store selling flare pens, and then he's looking out at the audience, and he says, "And I get paid for doing this."
Yes.
And it's like, this life, this world is so extraordinary, but we have taken on an ordinary mindset, which, folks, is the title of the book, Ordinary to Extraordinary: Achieving Remarkable Career Success Through Passion, Purpose, and Preparation, which we will get to preparation in just a moment. We talk on this program about life's purpose, finding one's life's purpose, which entails going within and listening to that still small voice. There was a public service announcement that came up, oh my gosh, 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago. And I still remember it to this day. The first scene is of these boys in the dirt playing with their Tonka trucks, digging a hole or whatever it was. And I remember doing that to my father's consternation. And the next scene is there are a bunch of guys walking around with hard hats. One guy's got a shirt with a tie. He's holding up some blueprints, and they're building a building. Next scene is this group of people. They're working with medical facilities. There's like a little girl. She's sort of doctoring her doll, right? The next scene is now she is a nurse or maybe a doctor in the emergency room tending to the wounded or those who are ailing. And what that said to me was, what you did as a child is probably the thing that you might want to think about doing as an adult. At 19, because I hadn't decided yet what I wanted to be when I grew up, I took an aptitude test.
Me too.
Do you know, I'm in broadcasting, but I've already told you where I live. Do you know what that aptitude test told me I should be? A farmer. A farmer. Now, there are all different kinds of quote unquote farming, i.e. working with nature. And as I mentioned earlier, I love being out and chopping the wood, and we have chickens, and I love taking care of them. I have one chicken who's like a puppy dog, follows me around the chicken run. And I love feeding them. I love making sure they've got a lot of wood shavings on the ground, which of course helps to reduce the smell, but they also love rooting around in it. Changing out their water every morning and every evening so it doesn't get stale and this and that and the other. We have a dog and a cat. We at one time had, we had 3 dogs and 9 cats. And where we live, it was okay because there was more than enough room. It wasn't in the city and so on and so forth. But it seems to me that as we grow up, we grow out of our single digits into our preteen to teenage to pre-adult and so forth. Somehow that is, I don't know what, filtered out, or we get different programming that says, no, you need to do something that will make you all kinds of money. Well, you've heard this about people who want to become artists. So you want to be a starving artist. Is that what you're saying? I know people and they're selling their art who are charging 2, 3, 4,000 or maybe $50,000 for doing what they love doing.
Mm-hmm.
So help us to hone in on if it's really important to us, because I got to tell you, being happy, there ain't nothing better.
Right.
It's what my one of the things that my father used to talk about in terms of, doing something you love doing. I think that's really what he was saying. Um, how do we hone in on that? How do we, you know, go in to find out that so that we can make the shift? And it may not be immediate. You may not be able to do it today or tomorrow, but at least maybe you can start to plan to make the transition. Wasn't it 2008-9 when a bunch of people were let go from their jobs because of the economic downturn? And what was the next explosion? Entrepreneurial explosion.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, please.
So, Richard, I too had my aptitudes tested. I had mine tested at 15. You're much wiser to do it at 19 because they change after about age 19. I've actually had mine done several times subsequent to test that theory. So, the first way that, to me, that you find your purpose, you begin to allow this purpose to be part of you, is to know your innate strengths. And that's what you discovered. And it might have been called a farmer, but you know that there are a lot of tentacles and a lot of different definitions to that. And right now, Richard, if you don't, and you know this, if you don't exercise that aptitude of that outdoors, creating, giving life to, making sure life, you'll be frustrated and you won't know why. But if you get back out with those chickens, oh, you feel good again.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell folks in the book. First of all, know thyself. Get your aptitudes tested. And I give a number of ways and places you can go to have that done. There are books on it. There are YouTubes on it. I went to the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation. But back to your being a farmer, when I was 15, I went to have my aptitudes tested. And do you know what they told this awkward little 15-year-old, almost teenager, that my perfect occupation would be? And there was only one: a life insurance salesperson.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Oh my, I was devastated.
Mm-hmm.
But when you peel that back, it was because my aptitudes were, I love analytics. I love helping people with complex issues. I love a little bit of competition. And 10 years later, I was Mutual of New York's #1 life insurance salesperson. So even though I resisted it, like you might have resisted farmer in the beginning, if you let it wash over you, there your strengths come out. And my purpose is about helping people, particularly with complex issues they don't really want to talk about. And death is #1 on that draft choice. So
I will tell you that my mother had a flower bed underneath the front window of my sister's bedroom, and she had several lantanas planted.
I love them.
And the only part of that I did not like was we did not own a weed whacker. I don't even know if they had them back then, needless to say. We had to get on our hands and knees and pull the weeds. Okay. That was probably the only part I didn't care much for, but there was just something about having your hands in the dirt, whether it was that or my brother and I playing in the backyard, digging a hole over in one corner of the yard, for whether we were playing army or we were playing with our trucks, and those kinds of things. We even used to find old scraps of wood and we would build a fort that we would nail together. And let me tell you, I stepped on a lot of nails back then. I can't remember how often I had to get a tetanus. Well, I think that the tetanus usually lasts about 10 years. So I think I got it once and I was fine. But those were, and then of course, we bicycled all over town.
Absolutely.
Bicycling was so much fun. Not so much fun today, because things have dramatically changed on the street level. But needless to say, it was. I mean, I think back and it just fills my heart with joy because I had that opportunity and so forth. I was even obviously contemplating at one point in my life that's how I'm going to get around for the rest of my life, not by
Mm.
choice per se, but because I was born legally blind.
Oh, right.
And in 1996, I got a lens implant. Now I'm driving. I'm driving a car. And the first time that my wife and I, well, when we moved here to Santa Barbara, I was driving a van, a rental van with a lot of our belongings. She was driving our Subaru with a U-Haul trailer hooked on the back. And all of a sudden, as we're going through LA traffic, I'm looking around going, I'm actually driving in LA traffic.
That's
Wow.
so
How cool is that? You know,
fair.
I don't know that I'd ever become an Uber driver or a bus driver. And then, of course, one of my big dreams, of course, which I shelved only because at the time I knew I would never get it. I always wanted to learn how to fly. When we moved to Santa Barbara, I started to, I think I have 2, maybe 3 hours of training with a friend of mine. And I have one of those log books. Uh, who knew? I mean, it's just amazing how time changes things as well. I want to talk about the third element here, and that's preparation, because it does require that we plan. Now, let me just say this about planning. People ask me, I'm age 64 now, here in 2024, and they ask me, so when you planning on retiring? And I say, I don't know. I have to check with my mechanic to see when I need a new set of tires on the car. That is the only retiring I plan to do. I just love doing this too much. I want to live to be 100. I have to outlive my great grandmother. On my mother's side, she lived to be 100 plus. She even got one of those letters from the governor.
Love
Congratulations
it.
to her. Yeah. So I've still got another, what, 66, 46, 36 years plus, and I've also said this too, that if today's my day, I'm good to go. Okay. I hope it's not. I really do, but I'm okay. There's still a lot I want to do, but I'll come back. I'm the one who believes that I'll come back. But let's talk about preparing to take on this transformation from ordinary to extraordinary.
Yes. Well, it's a long journey. You just spoke of it. And yours is I hope I outlive my grandmother maternal, who was the oldest living practicing chiropractor when she died at 105.
Wow.
So we both have beautiful role models
Mm,
to follow, don't we, Richard?
yes, we do.
So is preparation is the most beautiful, important investment you can do in mental health and the ability to go to extraordinary. When I am prepared for this show, Richard, I can sit down with you, and we have not met. I did read about you, and your background is remarkable and extraordinary, and I'm so grateful for medical miracles. But I could sit down with you, and I knew I was prepared for whatever questions you brought to me, because I know my material. I know the subject you brought me in for. That meant that I could join this time with you in a positive, excited state, not a fretting state. So if you prepare, you can enjoy the positive part of what you're asked to do in
Mm.
the work to be done. I have a chapter called Suddenly Sundays, and I doubt this happens to you, Richard, but for many people that face work on Monday, Sunday comes and goes way too fast. They start to get that anxious, horrible Sunday scary feeling because they're going to have to get out of the freedom of weekend and go back into the toil of work. If they flip the script like you do and like I do, that wouldn't be the case. But if they're not there yet, what I suggest is on Friday, in order to preserve your entire beautiful 48-hour weekend, invest in preparing for what you're doing on Monday. Look out, cast out. What do I have to do on Monday? Let me get ready for it on Friday. Let me put it on paper. Let me set up my meetings. Let me review my topics. And then let me put that away. And let me now go into a relaxing mode that I do not have to worry about what's happening Monday morning, because I'm so prepared when I leave on Friday afternoon. Same with every single day. Before I leave work, before I turn off my computer, I'm going to look, what is expected of me tomorrow? Am I ready to show up in that positive, excited state, happy, excited state? Or am I going to fret a little bit? And if I have fret, I'm not leaving. I'm going to get more prepared. It's a beautiful but simple little secret: preparation. And then you'll get better and better and better. And you will find, you look around and, wow, I am kind of extraordinary, because I'm always on my game. People know they can count on me. I love this phrase that a leader told me long ago: get to the place where when you're not in the room, they still hear your footsteps. They still hear your voice because of the impact you're leaving. That's when you get to extraordinary. You're there, Richard. You know that.
I do. And I actually had a well of excitement as you were talking there, because I started thinking just for a moment about one particular part of my life and thinking, wow, that's pretty darn good. And yet it was also an area where I used to fret about it. I used to just get all anxious about it. I'm going, no, man, you're doing okay, you know? And I also, since my father's passing almost a year and a half ago, matter of fact, his birthday was August 13th. And I remember last year, 2023, following his passing, my wife and I went out to the San Ynez Mission out in the valley. And we wanted to find something that I could take back to Phoenix for the memorial. And so I bought one of these, it's a rose cross. It's a cross made out of rose branches, and then a display of little tiny roses right there at the horizontal vertical section. And I was going to place that in his casket, you know, so that he'd have that with him just as a memento, what have you. And I fly back to Phoenix, and it turns out he was cremated. And I'm going, okay, so, and then of course I have a portion of his ashes. I brought it back to Santa Barbara with me, along with the cross. And I had someone create a cobalt blue glass urn for him, sealed it, and I put the cross on top. And I have that
Beautiful.
for right now. My mother has asked me on occasion, so have you scattered your father's ashes? And I'm thinking, it's not because I want to hang on to them. It's that he wasn't from California. I don't know where I would, do this. He's born in Arizona, and at least for right now, I have several of his other belongings that my mother had me go through his things when I was there for his memorial. But there are times when I speak out loud, and it's sort of like a self-pep talk, but it's not me. And I finally clued in. It's my dad. And
Beautiful.
I remember one of the things that my father, and this is something too that I think is part of the extraordinary aspect, that each of us needs to come to the realization that we are an influence, an impactor, if you will, on the lives of others. My father gave my mother all the credit for the six of us and our upbringing. Well, at his memorial, if there were a theme, and bear in mind, this was not choreographed, okay? This happened naturally. If there was a theme, a title to my father's memorial, it would have been, Dad, we are who we are because you were in our lives. I even wrote a song that I shared at the memorial. Daddy, you know how much I love you. Daddy, I know how much you care. Oh, Daddy,
Mm,
I wouldn't be half the man I am, Daddy, if you hadn't been there.
beautiful.
I
Wow.
know that he knows that now. Um, but we as individuals, we don't, and again, we're talking about this not from a narcissistic standpoint. We don't give ourselves enough credit for the the influence, the impact that we have on those around us. And hopefully it is a constructive. There are some out there right now that are rather destructive in their influence, and I try to tune them out. Um,
Right. There's a lot
let's
of
talk about
toxicity
both
out
of those.
there right
Can we
now.
talk about both of those aspects? Okay, number one is acknowledging that I am an influencer, not in the social media way, but also how we can tune out those who, and even if they're from a distance in the media that we're getting the information, even if they're from a distance, they still affect us if we continue to watch those little videos and things of that nature. Can you talk about those two aspects?
Absolutely. So I'll go to a notion by Jim Rohn, who was a speaker and an author. His notion was we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And these days, you must put in social media or television broadcast news
Mm-hmm.
if that is what you sit in front of and spend so much time scrolling through, watching, clicking through. And if you allow that toxicity to penetrate, you're not going to leave the kind of impact you want to, Richard. And you're right. We all are impacting lives. We are a community.
Mm-hmm.
We are a connectional society. Nobody stands alone outside of the circle unless they have to be very intentional about that. It's not easy to do. We are a connectional society. One of the things I did as a leader when we were faced with a big project was to say, I want you all to think about the legacy you want to leave with this project. What is it that you want to leave? And that puts that takes it out of this work to be done and makes it a personal, passionate project.
Mm.
And that's the script, right? And so impact is everywhere you want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
but you decide how positive it's going to be. And if you are constantly around negative people, negative voices, negative opinions, blaming, when did we become a society that has to blame everybody?
Oh.
I don't know when. And then I read the other day that we're also a society that has completely 100% lost patience because with technology, I got it right in front of me anytime, anywhere. And that's what leads to road rage, right? I'm impatient, but I can remain anonymous in my impatience. But anyway, the 5 people you spend the most time with. I encourage you to think about that, Richard. I encourage your listeners, because if there's somebody you need to kick out or something,
Mm-hmm.
kick it out.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not accretive, kick it out.
Yeah. You touched upon a couple of things there. Number one in particular is this aspect of change. When working for the Christian station, my boss handed out this book that he wanted us all to read. He made it mandatory. And okay, it was a small book, so it was not real oppressive. And the book was entitled Who Moved the Cheese?
Mm-hmm. I
And
know it.
yeah, and I read the book and I came back and I put it on his desk and I said, I've read it and I don't have any problem with people moving the cheese. If you want to move the cheese, whatever that might be, move it. Just tell me where you moved it. so I don't have to go searching for it. That is the only thing. But then there's
That's
go ahead.
that goes back to you said earlier, don't be territorial. That's a beautiful way to example your opinion of that. Pardon me for interrupting.
No, that's
Be a
fine.
shout.
Well, then there's change. And I've quoted this many times from John Denver. Um, Changes somehow frighten me. Still, I have to smile. It turns me on to think of growing old. And when I was 15, 20, what have you, it did. I thought, oh, that'll be cool when I get up there and so forth. And of course, as I got up there, I'm going, well, this is okay. And it wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I'm still happy that I'm up here. I still have a hard time with this concept of I'm in my 60s. Seriously? No, that can't. Seriously, because I feel inside, I feel 17. And my body reminds
Yeah.
me, okay, you go right ahead and feel 17 inside. Just remember, your outside is not 17. So be careful. But
Right.
this aspect of change, which is the constant in the universe, we have been taught and trained and programmed to abhor it, to fear it even. And this goes back to the thing I was talking about in terms of the attitude that the economy is the most important thing, you know. And when I would hear the economic news that would come out every so often, even if the numbers were good, the economists weren't happy because they still saw doom and gloom on the horizon. So I would constantly be asking the question of the economists who are listening, what numbers would make you happy? Okay. What numbers would make you happy? Maybe what would make you happy is to stop focusing on the numbers. Because, you know, you've heard this particular economic piece, the not the consumer price index, but it's the consumer's confidence, right?
Right.
And it seems to me there's also been and I can't remember what country it was in. It was a small little island, I think, that they used to, instead of the GDP, it was like the gross happiness index. And it seems to me that when it comes to change, things are going to change. They are,
Yeah.
but we can still be happy, right? Right? We could still be happy, Patty.
Absolutely. You know, I write a lot in the book about the need to get comfortable being uncomfortable because change is constant. You do not want to not change. Richard, you may be thinking you're still the 17-year-old in your head, but you know you're not. You are wise. You have so many years of wisdom and experience and interactions that we should welcome change because with it comes growth, and nobody wants to not grow, right? So I know it's uncomfortable, but you must begin to get comfortable with the uncomfortable if you are going to optimize a 40-year career journey, which is the trip of a lifetime. And you can get there in an extraordinary way and end up in an extraordinary way. But oh, by the way, you're going to be uncomfortable a whole lot of times. But on the other side of that, it's just like working out. On the other side of that, I don't have a sore muscle. I have a beautifully toned muscle, but I was uncomfortable getting to that calf.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because you've now raised another subject. Back in 2007, when we started this program, and it's hard to believe it's 17 years, almost. September 7th, 2007 was when we started this. I had a gal on my program. Her name was Barbara Marks Hubbard. She was a visionary. She, from what I understand, and I haven't Googled this information yet, and I really should to be more accurate. But apparently, she was part of a political team that ran for president. I don't know if it was back in the 60s, maybe the early 70s. Obviously, didn't get much notoriety, but nonetheless, she did. And she was sharing with us about this process. And this was back in 2007, right before the economic downturn. And she said that this process that humanity's going through in a global sense is like a woman giving birth. We are going through birth pangs. And of course, yeah, it's like you talked about, it's going to hurt for a while. Now, I am still guessing that we're still in them because we're still going through this turmoil. But I do also believe, as the optimist that I am, that it is possible that we collectively can achieve some great things if we will just get out of the victimhood and, maybe more importantly, Patty, get out of our way, right?
Exactly. And it goes back to that blaming. I love that you use the victim. I talk about that. Don't be a victim. It is not a pretty picture. And when I say that, I know that there are victims, and I give absolute respect and honor to those folks in that truly are victims. But when it's that my day didn't go the way I wanted to, and so I'm going to complain about it and I'm going to turn into a victim, that is a very bad look in the workplace. It's a very bad look in life, period. Reframe it, get your energy back. And Richard, it goes to that notion of blaming. When do we turn into this country that has to find the person to blame? If something happens, you watch the news cycle, you'll hear the news, but then the next 10 hours of that oft repeated show or topic will be who's to blame. And you know what that does? That mentality says, I'm not going to take a risk because I don't want to be wrong, because I don't want to be blamed. And if we stop taking risks, we are going to stop innovating. We're going to not move. We're going to go backwards. And it's the phenomena, like, it's so interesting to me that a house well lived in keeps getting better and better and better. And we're using it, all of its parts, and we're banging, bicycles on walls, and dogs are doing bad things on carpets, but we're using it and it's a happy house. But look at a house that stands abandoned and doesn't get movement and doesn't get a chance to change or feel or be bumped into. It crumbles in on itself.
Yeah.
And if we stop taking risks because we're scared we'll be blamed, we'll turn into that house that never does anything, and we'll crumble up, I think.
I think you're right. Absolutely. There's another aspect too, and we tend to do this, and it has permeated the workplace, and it's unfortunately part of the national, I don't want to say consciousness, but I suppose that's maybe an appropriate word, that it's talked about a lot. Division, divided. We are divided, and for a lot of different reasons, not just the ones that maybe we're thinking about. And what I find so fascinating is those people who are of faith, of which I am also, who have chosen to stick to their guns, if you will, maybe literally. What they seem to forget is that a house divided against itself cannot and will not stand. And the bottom line is, if we want, when it comes to the great American experiment, if we want it to succeed, we got to stop the division. It has to stop. And the question that might come to someone they might say, who's to start? Well, the answer is quite simple. You have to start. There was a maximum marriage seminar audio tape series that I happened to garner when I was at the Christian station. I can't even remember the minister's presentation, but he was sharing, because he was also a therapist. He was sharing about how um, this couple was in there for counseling, and she just was all over the husband, just ragging on him like you wouldn't believe, and on and on and on. And basically, the comments from the therapist says, "Look, if the two of you want to bring this thing together, you need to you need to stop, you need to forgive, you need to," and whatever it was that he said. And the response, I think, by the wife was, well, who starts first?
Mm.
And he looked at both of them and said, "You do." And that's
You.
one of the things too that goes to other issues as well. When I hear about like the environment, well, China's not doing this, and India's not doing that, and this country's not doing. They're polluting, and they're doing this and that and the other. So why should we? What difference does it? Do you base the cleaning of your own living space, your own home? Do you base that on what your neighbors are doing? We never did. And let me tell you, there were times when I went to my neighbor's house when I was a kid growing up, and it wasn't the cleanest of places, but our house, then this was not, we're better than them. No, it wasn't that. It was, we didn't base what we did on what other people did. And I think that's another element too, especially in the workplace when we're talking about all of this, that you don't do the right thing just because others are watching. I'll give you real quick. 2 o'clock in the morning. You're in the middle of, let's just say, Nebraska. And you come to a four-way stop out in there are no lights, nothing, but there's a stop sign. And the question is, do you stop?
Mm-hmm.
There are no cars coming from any of the other three directions. Do you stop? And many people will say, no, why would I need to stop? Because there's nobody else. I says, because it's the right thing to do. You agreed when you got that license to follow the rules of the road based upon each state. And it's like using one's turn signal. This is something that was taught to me. It says, even if you're using your turn signal in the parking lot, you're better to do that than not, because you get into, well, quote unquote, muscle memory.
Right. Exactly. I'm a stopper at that stop sign, Richard. I would stop. My husband is not. But it takes two to last a 34-year marriage happily, and we're going on another 34. But it goes back to the notion that we talked about earlier, that we are a connectional society, and what I do is going to impact others. And do I want that impact to add energy or take it away? And you stand in a space, and you're blessed to stand in a space. And so make the best of the space you get to occupy, and be accretive to the world and the land. I mean, it's a really nice place. At the end of the day, when you practice gratitude, when you say your prayers, if you're a prayerful person, and I am, to be able to think of the ways that you might have, even just in the tiniest of ways, touch somebody's life that you know nothing about what they are standing in that day, but you might have left a positive light. We are connectional. You don't stand on your own. Be accretive. Be accretive.
Patty, you and I are here, maybe collectively, but I know even individually, we are here talking right now because of the thousands of people who have entered, and some have left, but been a part of our lives. And it goes also to choices. Now, that's one of the other aspects. It's also the title of my book, Choices. We give people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true. And it is all of the choices that we have made that have brought us right here, right now, to what we're doing and saying and talking and so forth. It will be all of the choices that we make from this point forward that will determine where we will be in the future. And I loved what one of my guests said. And those choices that you are making today and tomorrow are based upon your perception of what you think your future will be. Are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? And your choices are going to bear out your attitude.
Exactly.
And that would
Totally.
be the same thing with even within a business, and let alone a family. You remember when Steve Jobs passed?
Mhm.
My first thought was, unless somebody grabbed the vision that he had, Apple isn't going to last. Well, apparently somebody did.
Yes,
They
exactly.
did. So it
Mhm.
is possible to, so to speak, transfer a vision. And it's the same thing within a family. Um, so in the closing moments here, talk to us a little bit about the importance of, even if you don't know what choices you have, and I won't go into it now, you have choices. They are like, they're like currency in a manner of speaking, because they'll, so to speak, buy into something new.
Absolutely. And I love that we are a product of all the choices we've made for all the years. And I'll go back to, because my focus in the book is this 40-year career journey you're on.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that it's 30 or 40 years. And you must be wise with those choices. But here's what I love for people to do. I challenge them. Richard, it's the very last day of your career. And I know you don't ever want to have a last day of your career, but it is the last day of your career. I want you to think about what you see out of your office window. If you have a window, if not, fill in the blank. You get what I'm saying. And I will tell you, I've done this exercise, and my office window, I saw a bundle of tall downtown buildings when I looked that way. And when I looked through my doorway, I saw my wonderful assistant working away. And that, for me, meant that I wanted to leave my work world in an executive position in a large corporate environment in a busy downtown. And as it happened, that was exactly the way I left my corporate career. I bring that up to say that it is really a good thing to look in the farthest distance you can and paint your life at that end of career, and then rappel backwards. And what do you need to choose today, tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years to make sure you hit that goal?
Well, I will tell you that this conversation has been just fascinating, and I look forward to maybe having you back again, especially once you have finally moved all of your furniture into your new condo. And again, I understand it's a winter place, but nonetheless, it's something that, I've talked about most all of these different things with many of my other guests who are not focusing on just the workplace, but just upon the life that we live. And I thank you so much for giving us so much time and sharing your insights through this particular work you have, Ordinary to Extraordinary: Achieving Remarkable Career Success Through Passion, Purpose, and Preparation. Really do appreciate what you have shared with us today.
Richard, thank you for letting me tell my story.
You are very welcome. And I want to thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And then Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. And we're streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. I hope you'll subscribe and then click notifications so that when I post a new conversation, just like this one, you will know and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, eavesdrop, so to speak. We certainly hope that we are entertaining as well as edifying, inspiring, and so forth. So please make it a point. We also ask if you can help us out financially. You'd like to be a part of the work that we are doing here on Tell Me Your Story. We do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. When they ask to whom are you sending the funds, the email address you'll want to put in is richard@richarddugan.com. Very easy, richard@richarddugan.com. And of course, as always, during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, please take the time to spend time in that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. Now, I didn't mention this before, but I have 3 more questions for you that I ask all of my guests. And the first of those is, I don't have to ask if you're sitting down because I know you are. Who is Pattie-Dale Tye?
She is a very happy, Christian, fulfilled woman with a lot of life left in her.
What gets you up in the morning?
The fact that I can make a difference and that I get to get up in the morning.
And finally, what was your best day?
My best day was the day that my husband proposed to me on a very high mountaintop in Montana behind a sign that was called Love Springs.
Well, that's beautiful. And again, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward, yes, to having you back again to talk more about the work that you're doing, especially through the book, Ordinary to Extraordinary, Achieving Remarkable Career Success Through Passion, Purpose, and Preparation. The website, Pattie-Dale Tye, PattiedaleTye.com. And we thank you folks again for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Dad, I am, continue to be happy because I am. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.